asking first is, what were the major issues in the community here and also in the nation in a broader scope when you first came to USG?
The biggest question in the air at that time, of course, was the Vietnam War. We were in the middle of it.
So you came around?
We came 68, 70, around that area. The church was in turmoil. Dave Park was our minister at that time. He had made the choice to go a little bit further to the left on the racial issue than much of the congregation. We still had a fairly old-fashioned congregation.
I have to stop us. I'm so sorry. Can you stop me?
Oh, I can take it out.
Yeah, because I'm so sorry, Tom. I didn't ask you to introduce yourself, and maybe some new people will be watching this and they'll be going, oh, who's that handsome, articulate man? So
Should we
can
start over again?
Yes, I'm so
Don't worry
sorry.
about it. No, the people will
Right.
there'll be a
It's at the beginning of every other interview. So.
I'm Tom Schoonmaker. My wife and I joined the church sometime around 1968, 1970. We had come for about a year before we joined. When we joined, we got extremely involved. At that time, the Vietnam War was a big deal. It was pros and cons still. From a racial standpoint, we were here also in a flux. We had a very large percentage of our congregation that was of the elder generation, which I fit now, because it was 50 years ago. And some of them were fairly old-fashioned in their racial points of view. We had one very well-educated, good-looking, smart, handsome black woman who said to me one day when I asked her, had things changed? She said, Tom, things have gone underground. We came here from Westchester County, New York. We found Mount Airy, actually Anne found it, because she read an article in a magazine written by a woman who had come here from Omaha, Nebraska, Lois Stalvey, and then Lois wrote 2 books about living in an interracial community in Mount Airy. Anne and she became good friends, and Lois was principally responsible for our moving to Mount Airy. She sold the concept to us because we were bringing our kids up in WASP ghettos. Up until that time, we'd lived in 11 houses. And when we landed in Mount Airy, we said, this is where we're going to stay. We really fell in love with the community. And the Stalveys had a lot to do with it. They showed us, Lois's husband showed us the house on McAllen Street that we lived in until a year or so ago. We wanted to live in a racially integrated community. We found a perfect spot. We joined a very fine Unitarian church. I would say at that time, probably 50% of the congregation was in support of Dave Park's position that he was going to move us towards more integration within our community. Ann and I, of course, felt very strongly in favor of that. I'd say that's maybe, if that's 50%, another 35-40% was okay with it. A little less aggressive in their approach to wanting to integrate. And I think there were about probably 10% of the congregation who wished that the problem would go away. One of the key people here suggested to one of our friends who was a high school principal, very bright, well-educated, upfront person of color, and had been suggested to her that she might feel more comfortable in a black church down in Germantown.
So are you speaking about Reverend Dascom?
Yes.
Yes, okay.
Yeah, it was Fran Emery who...
It was Fran Emery, and
Yeah.
Fran is still a member of this church. She is
So-
a delightful person.
So you're kind of answering the next question, which is what was the racial climate here when you first attended?
Yeah.
It sounds as though you're saying it was largely open. And what specifically, how did people react to that climate? So, I mean, I think you're covering that really well if you wanted to say one or two more things about that.
Well, it was, I think, younger people found it attractive. I hate to say this, but old people are less accepting of change. I guess that includes me now. But the funny thing is, I've gotten more liberal as I've gotten older. I was a fairly conservative guy when we moved to Philly. Our oldest daughter married a black man, an African American. He wasn't particularly strongly black, but he was of color. And we have two marvelous grandchildren from that union, and they're just beautiful kids. The older is a boy. He's my namesake, and I'm extremely proud of it and him. And his little sister just graduated Phi Beta Kappa from Stanford, so it was a good combination.
Wonderful. So during that time when you were first a member here, you and Ann were first members, who at that particular time, not all the way down through the years, but were the major, would you call them major players at USG? That would mean involved in other work in addition to any kind of racial integration work or increasing maybe diversity in the church, but just in general, the few names that would stick out for you as the big
I spent
names.
most of my 50 years here working on financial issues, administrative issues, building issues, because that was not attractive to people who joined the anti-racism committee. So I did feel that I could do those things, support the anti-racism committee in that way, and I spent a lot of time. I'm an agnostic bordering on being an atheist, and I was always surprised that I spent so much of my time here supporting this church, but I felt that we needed to go towards anti-racism and those kinds of causes. And the way that I could be of most use is do things that other people don't want to do. Alan Mitchell was sort of my mentor. He was senior vice president of PICO at that time. Joe Watlington, a man of color, had his own insurance business. Joe was very much involved. Unfortunately, he died fairly young, and his wife is still alive. She's a delightful lady, and she's 90 years old now, Marion. Earl Spaulding was another. Earl was, I believe, head of the medical department at Temple University. Very active in the finance, as was Alan Mitchell. George and Mary Kidd. Actually, George Kidd was a member of the Tuskegee Airmen. Bert Levy, another very active member at that time, still alive, was a member of the Tuskegee Airmen. We had a third fellow who wasn't that active.
That's okay.
Age. But we had three members of the Tuskegee Airmen in the congregation.
And they were very actively involved in the congregation.
Two of them were, yes. George was a super guy.
Anybody else stand out in your mind as far as just maybe social justice activities?
Well, of course, our ministers were that way. Dave Park was very strong that way, and his successors. Excuse me.
Committee-wise, do you have any recollection of specific committee, social justice, just broad social justice committee work? Or?
The Moores, Harry and Gertrude Moore. I think if you had a rainbow of right to left, Gertrude and Harry would be below the bottom on the left. Extremely liberal, to the degree where they didn't like people over on this side of the rainbow. But they were lovely people, and they had big hearts, and they were very involved in anti-racism, which they fit in pretty well here. Everybody liked them.
That's great. So you did speak a little bit about your roles as very involved in finance. Did you want to say any more about your roles? Because I know you've done a lot with this congregation.
I've been chair of many committees. I was president of the board. I was treasurer. I started the pledge. I did the pledge campaign for 10, 15 years. I started the capital gifts campaign in the year 2000. We raised about $300,000. Mostly in those areas. I've been many years the bass soloist in the choir. I'm all over the place. I started the Memorial Garden, and I continue to go out there once a week with a group, all women actually, and we keep the garden in good shape. And there's a bunch of other things that I won't bother with.
So thank you for all those wonderful contributions. And, what would you say, just to shift the topic a little bit, has changed since the beginning, since when you and Ann were first members?
Big change.
And here at USG, what would you say has changed? What do you see as some of the biggest changes that come to mind?
The biggest change is the complete switch in the age groups. When we first joined, we were in our 30s. We were, quote unquote, the young couple. Mm-hmm. Now I'm fascinated every Sunday, all of these kids up front. You would have found 2 or 3 when we first joined the church. The demographics of the congregation has greatly changed. The younger people, maybe they can't support the church as well financially as the older generation can now, but they're the future of the church. That has been a huge change. The hymns in the morning, the songs that we hear from the congregation, there's 10 times as much volume as there was 50 years ago. 50 years ago, everybody... Now it's, it's great.
So wonderful enthusiasm and participation.
Much more enthusiasm. The youth is responsible. And it's a much more open congregation. Welcoming is the word. And frankly, Kent's had a whole lot to do with that. And his predecessors were particularly good about that. We had, let's see, I think we've had 4 or 5 ministers since I've been here. And they've all been good that way.
Great, thank you. So how would you say you personally have evolved while attending USG?
Yeah, I think about that every once in a while. Becoming a Unitarian, we were married as Methodists. I grew up in the Methodist church. Becoming a Unitarian and the 7 principles are very good, I think. I couldn't quote them, but I've heard them so many times that I know that I agree with them. I've changed because my instincts for multiculturalism have been augmented and supported. I was a businessman, and I think I could have been sucked over into a little further into the right than I am now. And the church has kept me on the path that I find most comfortable.
That's great. Thank you. So looking forward from here, what changes would you propose or recommend for USG?
I would propose absolutely no changes. I think the younger generation is doing a super job. One of the reasons we hired Kent was because he was young. And as my wife says, when you have a young minister, you get a younger congregation. The young people are just super, and I don't know that I would change a thing, because the direction is right, the culture is right. Kent pushes very hard that we continue to expand in that area, and the young leadership that's developed is quite good, and I don't think I'd change anything.
That's great. So thinking of the UU7 principles, and I think you said this really well, but I'm going to ask the question anyway because it's on the paper. What has your involvement here meant to you personally?
It has made me, it has helped support my instincts. I feel strongly that those who have need to share with those who have not. We're a long ways from being wealthy. I get very upset when I see a row of huge yachts down the Florida coast that probably cost $30 million each. And I wonder whether those people who own those yachts do anything of good for their society. I think too many people in America say, I've got mine, I want more, and the hell with you. I do feel that Donald Trump's a good example.
So are you saying that you feel that being here as a member for all these years and contributing significantly here with your time and your energy and your enthusiasm, are you saying that has influenced?
It has had a big influence on me, yes.
In what way particularly?
It's supported and augmented my cultural acceptance of change,
Great.
which is, in my judgment, isn't fast enough. But Americans are a little slow to catch on, I think.
So I want to comment on that one. So I think you definitely answered the first part of this question. What are the changes you see needing to happen in the future at Unitarian Society of Germantown?
Growth.
Okay.
We need growth. It's extremely important. We've got a very expensive property here. It's a beautiful property. It's irreplaceable, actually. And we need to grow in order to keep our house in good shape. If you have a house that's in good shape, you do attract people who like nice houses. And if they like nice houses, they're going to come. As I mentioned, I started a capital gifts campaign 15 years ago. I think it's time for a new one. The growth of the congregation is, to me, our number one priority right now.
And do you have any thoughts about what specifically you would like to see happen in this congregation with the role of Ending Racism Committee?
Well, the Ending Racism Committee is one of the magnets, I think. It's also one of the things that needs more support. As I said, I have not been personally terribly involved in it because of other things. But to me, that's where our emphasis needs to go. Those areas. Your 7 principles again. And anti-racism is a very big element there.
So you'd like to see us have more support in Ending Racism Committee, not
Indeed,
necessarily go in a specific direction?
However the committee decides it needs to go, I would support that.
Great. So you've definitely answered the next question, how you've evolved. I'm not going to ask you that one again. But I'm going to ask you one more very specific question. Did you work with any particular people or groups here at USG to help improve the racial climate?
Well, I don't know that I've worked with any groups. 90% of the people of color in the church I consider friends. I guess my social acceptance and support has been useful to them. And sometimes I will make an extra special effort to go talk to someone of color who I have not seen before. It's been of use to me, and I hope of use to them.
Well, thank you so much for this interview and your candor, and
I think that
really appreciate it.
one way of growing is not just the racism of African Americans, but a whole cultural acceptance. Like I think Kent is really working towards bringing in the Hispanic community, and the Diwali ceremony kind of brings in the East Indian community.
Yeah.
The conflict that has kind of come up in some of these other interviews is what can the church do to reach out to those communities and to bring them into the house, so to speak?
PR is not one of my areas. We've got people that are expert in those areas, and I think they need support and financing to do their thing too. We all can't do everything.
No, that's correct.
Have to pick our slots.
Thank you, Tom. This was really delightful.
Oh, it's my pleasure.
And thank you for all you've done for this congregation. It's really remarkable.
It's been a labor of love.
Yeah, I can tell.
And I know why you come in to work on the Memorial Garden. As I know why you come in to work on the Memorial Garden is to be with all that lovely company.
Oh, I saw the twinkle in your eye. And I was going to say something, and I said, this interview's not about you, Gail. It's leave it focused. But I almost couldn't resist saying, oh, I'll bet that's a real tragedy having to work with all the women.
I can't get any guys to come out.
When do you meet?
And I feel that way about ERC. We really need male presence. And young. This is where I want to see our youth. Because like you said, exactly like you said, the youth is, the future, but the youth is tremendously energetic, and it's who's leading the Black Lives Matter movement. It's young black people. But
Yeah.
I want to see more male presence. I would love to in our ending racism.
Yeah. But, it's really the Building and Grounds Committee is 70% male. So, males go one direction usually, and females quite often will go
Right, but that, we kind of thought that started changing back in, what was that, the 60s with feminism?
It has started.
It's 2015? How long does this
shoot,
take?
We're slow. We're slow, particularly in America. We're slow.
We are. You're
We
right.
have nobody telling us to do it.
I enjoyed that comment because I think we are so far behind the the curve in many ways, and
Yeah.
ahead of the curve in others.
Yeah. We got nobody dictating to us how to go. And we got all these people over here that need to catch up.
Yeah, yeah. So, wonderful.
All right, well, thank you, Gail.
It's a wrap.
Thank you, Jeff.
Thank you.
Jeff
Tell
is-
Ann I send my best, and she'll